Delighted to be joined by a panel of diversity and inclusion experts who will be able to provide you with some deeper insight into the topic of inclusion. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to our panel of speakers. First up is Nadine Dyer. Nadine is a respect and inclusion manager at Deloitte and is co-chair of Deloitte's Multicultural network and lead for the ethnic minorities in their financial advisory working group. Nadine also sits on the firm's Ethnicity Council and is one of 4 founding individuals who developed Deloitte's Black Action Plan. We're also joined by Beatrice Ruiz, who is the CEO of Trampoline Global Consulting. Having worked across 6 different countries, Bea has accumulated a wealth of experience building inclusive environments with many different challenges. She's also a guest speaker for Natwest Global and a regular guest contributor and speaker to DEI podcasts, online magazines, and also global events. And we are also joined by Yinka Fadina, who is a head of audit within the Natwest group. Yinka is the ex-global chair of the Multicultural network and the co-lead in Natwest Banking on Racial Equality Task Force, commissioned to review the progress made on the ethnicity agenda within the bank. Today, we would love to understand where you are on your journey to inclusion and what is important to you. So you'll notice in the group chat function, we have provided a link to a short survey. If you could fill that out over the course of the session, it would be great to gather an overview of the group. And of course, the survey is anonymous, so we would love your feedback, your honest feedback. Also, we will have a 20-minute Q&A session towards the end, so please do submit any questions that you have in the chat. Don't hesitate or wait, throw them in the mix, and we'll certainly try to get through as many questions as possible. Right, I'm really excited, as you can quite visibly see, so let's get started. So let's start with Nadine. There are many organizations that are starting to record diversity data, but why isn't measuring data enough? Why should we measure inclusion? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to take part in this discussion today, Alex. So why isn't diversity enough and why are we not measuring inclusion? It's a very good question. For me, I think diversity alone really is not the full story. In order for a diverse workforce to flourish, employees need to feel included. And now, while the definition of inclusion is very much elusive, there are numerous terms that you can relate to it, but really at its core, it's really about the satisfaction of 2 fundamental human needs. And one is for belonging and safety, and the other one is around uniqueness. So therefore, inclusion represents a fine balance between employees feeling they belong and that their differences are both acknowledged and accepted, as well as being embraced and being able to make meaningful contributions to the work. So while it's great that, we're looking at diversity and looking at those stats, it's so important to measure whether employees are feeling included. And that's the only way we can understand where inclusion is lacking, where it's thriving, and also to look at the different experiences of different groups and to see whether different groups are experiencing different levels of inclusion and belonging. And once we've done that, it makes it so much easier to reveal actionable insights that we can take forward to improve inclusion for all in the organization. So for me, I feel like inclusion is so very much important to measure. And it doesn't have to be difficult. Recently, I conducted a survey within financial advisory, just asking those basic questions, are you feeling included? Do you feel like you belong? And some of the output was very interesting, and you could see the differences between different groups of individuals. And with that insight, we're able to now put in actions to make people hopefully feel more included. So it's really important that we also measure inclusion and not just diversity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then Beatrice, could you add to that? I mean, what are the different ways of measuring inclusion?
Well, first of all, I would like to actually there and try to put, let's say, like a definition to inclusion. And of course, everyone else feel free to jump in. But my understanding is that in the context of the working environment, we often try to describe inclusion as being able to bring your whole self to work, leaving nothing behind, just your whole unique self to the office. And that is actually a dream. We all want to work towards that. But at the same time, as Nadine was mentioning, you know, what does that mean? How do we make it happen? And answering to your question, Alex, how do we measure what we're doing and the progress? So from the specific ways of collecting data that are going to help us set our baseline and then measure the progress, and all in all, increase inclusion in our companies, I would like to highlight 3 ways of measuring inclusion. So the first one, an effective way to measure inclusion that I'm actually applying to a global financial company that I'm working with right now, and also to a global tech company, is to create an in-depth questionnaire with a list of, let's say, incidents. So just like when we go to the doctor and fill out a medical questionnaire. So think about it, when you're healthy, you're not even aware of how many illnesses are out there. However, when you suffer, or if you know someone who's suffering from any medical condition shown in those exhaustive, very long medical forms, it really helps identify what's going on. So I would say through this questionnaire, ask people in your company to share whether, how often, and what types of exclusion they experience. So this option requires, of course, careful planning, but you can always start by creating a specific work stream with board representation. You can leverage your employee resourcing groups. I mean, they will be more than happy to receive the support and to align with you into learning more about the types of exclusion that your employees are going through. The second way of measuring inclusion that I would like to share, and also to your point, Nadine, is capturing employee perceptions of inclusion and representation. So perceptions around fair treatment, decision-making, psychological safety, trust, belonging, and so on. So the smaller the gap between the employee's answer and the company statement, the more inclusive your organization is and the better aligned you all are. And the third way, and the final that I would like to share with you, is that while this might sound obvious, it is actually crucial to listen. But like listen, not listening to respond, but truly listen, be curious, accept that no one knows everything, self-reflect, raise self-awareness, work on your own biases, because we all know people that are always more than happy to work on your biases, but not on their own. And believe me, everyone is biased. We all have more than enough, starting with ourselves. And all in all, embrace change. And I would like to share with you that, you know, there's a lot of information out there online available. For example, a new Gartner research outlines how to put numbers to the concept of inclusion, what meaningful action looks like for leaders, potential pitfalls, to avoid in the process. There are also companies like Salesforce or PwC that have created D&I scorecards to measure their progress in the inclusion arena. So all these options are available online, and they really are a great way to start.
Right. Thank you. And I really, I love the comparison with going to a doctor, and you wouldn't know, what ailments or anything before going there. So that's such a great comparison there. And Yinka, what is an employer's responsibility in creating an inclusive environment?
So I think that, I think an employer has to believe in everybody. So, a real true leader or an employer, that inclusive employer, it believes in everybody. And I think I probably reiterate what Bee's just mentioned about being able to listen and listen again. And creating those processes and platforms which allows leaders to listen and also employees to listen. And those things may include things like mentoring programs, focus groups. But I think even for leaders, like one-to-one sessions, your normal one-to-one sessions that you have with colleagues, let it not just be about the task at hand, but also learning a bit more about, who you're working with and, what are the things that they do in their day-to-day lives that potentially could be a barrier to their work life. So yeah, just reiterating that point that being made around listening, I think it's so important, but just knowing that it's not a one-off activity, but it's a continuous process. I think also employers and leaders really need to take action. So listening is a key element. It's the beginning, but it's definitely not the end. And it's, what actions can you take based on what your employees are telling you? And I think some of the things that, I've experienced is things like the recruitment process. So, in order to make a difference, to be inclusive, I think we have to be measured, intentional and deliberate about our actions. So it's really thinking outside of the box, what's going to make the difference, and not recruiting in your own image, but actually thinking, what are my weaknesses and what are my strengths, and how can I make up a team that complements all of those weaknesses and strengths that I have. And I think that's how it should be reflected when thinking about recruitment. I think the other key action for me is around sponsorship. So, going out there and really advocating for somebody who needs that extra support, who needs those doors opened for them because they are a bit hesitant or have had barriers they've faced in the past, or being that voice, almost of the voiceless when that person is not there, and being able to support that colleague. And I think for me, lastly, what would really be amazing is if you find things that work, really shouting about them. So, what's working for you, and also being honest around maybe some of the challenges that you've had in order to get there. But really being that position of, I've tried this, it's worked. And, whether that's your peers, whether peer organisations or peers within your organisation, and you should try it too, because it's the right thing to do.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And definitely in terms of taking action, I think if an employee completes a survey and it's being really quite open, I think it really is important to really take action, as Yinka mentioned, and that can become a little bit of a problem if no action is taking place. It's that you can lose trust. So completely agree, and thank you very much for that. So Beatrice, I'm keen to come back to you and maybe expand upon what I've maybe just spoken about. I mean, what are the key challenges to measuring inclusion?
Well, actually, after listening to what Yinka just said, which I love, by the way, thank you. I'm actually thinking that one of the main challenges is actually defining what challenges you are going to tackle first. How are we going to prioritize? But so from the many challenges that we face when we work towards measuring inclusion, I would like to highlight 3, and I'm going back to my 3 number. We have to, just focus on a small number to start with. But the first challenge, I would say, one of the main challenges in measuring inclusion is that while diversity is relatively easy to measure by collecting and analyzing data related to protected classes, for example, once again, we tend to describe inclusion in a more qualitative, often subjective terms. And as we saw before, in the context of the working environment in the office, we often describe inclusion as being able to bring yourself to work. And now, what do we do with that? So I would say, big challenge. We all want that, but it really is a challenge to move from the good intention to, as Yinka mentioned, to the actual actions. And this brings us to the next challenge, and it's the fact that inclusion is actually invisible to those who enjoy it. So when you feel included, you don't need to think about it. So, and actually, I read recently that this happens, and I'm reading the line for you, because inclusion reflects the absence of incidents that make one feel excluded. So basically, inclusion is the accent of exclusion. So you don't feel excluded, you feel included, life is good for you. So that is actually a big challenge. And third, I would say that some executives and senior leaders feel like they have to walk on eggshells. And they're afraid that employees will react negatively. They don't know really how to handle it. So sometimes they just choose not to, which I personally don't think that that is the solution. We need to really start feeling comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I would like to share that actually there is overwhelming evidence out there that says that employees appreciate being allowed to share their experiences and provide feedback. So actually, some studies show that even the simplest of employee success surveys decreases churn rates and increases productivity. And of course, there always, you might always find some employees that do not appreciate being reminded of how excluded they feel with all these initiatives. But in general, they really will appreciate you stepping forward in a genuine effort to identify problems with a clear commitment to using data to increase inclusion in the workplace. And allow me to highlight genuine, because I think this is really, really important. Alex, you know me very well by now, but for everyone else, really, this is not about checking boxes. This is really about change from the core, from the heart, to move forward.
Thank you very much. And Nadine, what are the key approaches to achieving an inclusive environment? Are there any examples that you could share with us around this?
Yeah, just going on from what Bea just said around, change, and Yinka said, it's not one-off, it's consistent. It's a continuous thing that you have to be doing. And it's nothing special. It's nothing, unique. It's all around continuing the conversation, continuing to learn about others. It's around allyship. It's about taking personal ownership. So once we do these things collectively and on an ongoing basis, what you find is that people are much more open. People are having open conversations, learning, and feeling more included. And as I said, it's nothing special. But I guess as organizations, we do have to put on, special events or Zoom sessions to get everyone together to start having these conversations. But that's what it really is. It's about speaking to one another, understanding each other's experiences, learning about different cultures, different people, and being open to learn and to make mistakes and to admit when you've made a mistake. Being a real ally, taking that seriously, and taking personal responsibility. And I think all of those things collectively will help to make the workplace so much more inclusive. And I think that is going on across a lot of organizations now. People are really starting to have those honest conversations and are being more open, and people are feeling a bit more included. So you know, we know we're all on a journey, but I think it's one that's a good one, a good journey to be on. So yeah, nothing special, Alex, just constant conversation and learning.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And you know, inclusion isn't just sorry, the responsibility of employers. I think it's the responsibility of everybody. So what is an employer's responsibility, Yinka, in creating an inclusive environment?
I think, you know, for me, from a personal level, it's about being open, like Nadine said, and just really knowing that people will make mistakes, but this is a journey that we're all on, you know, and everybody's in different positions in that journey, and just being open to share a bit more about yourself and you know, your lived experiences and where you're coming from, but also, you know, what are your future aspirations, your career aspirations. And I think for me it's about being brave, and just that willingness to keep going. So knowing that it's not going to be perfect, but actually just bringing everybody in, and letting people express themselves, you know, being able to bring the best of themselves. And sometimes it doesn't always have to be a leader that notices that somebody's not involved in that conversation. You know, you too may be able to find that space to say, oh, I noticed that you wanted to say something. Did you have something that you wanted to add? So I think it's just being mindful of everybody, being open, and just, you know, wanting to hear about other people, but also wanting to share about yourself.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we're over to the Q&A session now. We wanted to create an event which is going to be very engaging, and we want to kind of open the floor up to our viewers. So we've got one question actually in the chat function for Nadine from Hefsi. So how has inclusion feedback changed before or after the pandemic? Have you seen changes in your survey results?
That's a good question. So the survey that I done recently was the first time that I had run this survey. We do have a Your Voice survey, which which is different to the one I've done recently. So I couldn't give you a clear answer to pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. But I would say the feeling and what came out of the survey that I ran was that people are feeling, I would say, more included in the conversation around things when it comes to diversity. But because there's been so much going on, you know, the pandemic, et cetera, there's that side of things, because, you know, we've been away from each other in the office. So it's difficult, but people are feeling that the firm are doing all that they can do to make sure that people do feel included. There's lots of, you know, coffee clubs and, you know, Pilates and lots of things to get involved with. So it's really on the individual to grab hold of what's on offer, because there's so much out there. You know, we've got all our employee resource groups, you know, there's so much activity going on. It's for the individual to go, you know what, let me get involved. Hard for me to answer that question.
A great question though, very good. Actually, could I throw a similar question over to you, Beatrice? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Actually, with a couple of clients that I'm working on right now, within finance and tech, I've been working with them from, let me see, right before the pandemic until now, more or less. And I have to say that I have seen a lot of change. Like, I don't have like hard numbers because like I did not run a survey like that, like Nadine was mentioning, but I can tell you that on top of what Nadine mentioned, that companies are really, really putting, you know, all these resources for their employees to feel included. Big shift. I have seen a big, let's say, transformation around learning about the educational piece that is so needed around diversity and inclusion, because, you know, aside from all the the employee perceptions and all the work that we are doing, we also need our executive leaders, senior leaders, managers to be on board. We need them to, let's say, like lead the way within the company. So in that respect, I've seen like a big shift, but also, and this is maybe a more personal perception, I've seen that because we are not in the office, all those situations where, for example, I don't know, each person has their own friends within the office and they go for lunch every day with them without realizing that someone else is, there in the corner alone, not feeling completely excluded. All those situations are gone. Plus, now we have all these meetings via WebEx, Zoom, and so on. So there's no judgment of any kind, because like it's actually hard to explain, but even when we don't use the cameras, the inclusion increases even more. I mean, sad as it sounds, but at the same time, looking on the bright side, they're not seeing you, you're just a voice somewhere in the world. And all of a sudden, everyone with the pandemic, because we're all feeling like, let's say, more alone and more receptive, it really is working out pretty well in terms of being open-minded and being inclusive. So I guess, if we look at the positive side of the pandemic, I have seen big progress in that area.
Thank you. Great. And we've got a question from Jabeen, and it's absolutely a great question. So, are we being ambitious enough? Jabeen feels that there is plenty of focus on individual changes and recruitment, but what about specific organizational change to ensure diversity and inclusion throughout the organization, starting with a truly diverse top management is achieved? Would anybody like to kind of answer that question?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I agree that the focus does need to be around diversity at the top. And that's why, we look around us, we see the figures. And that's why we put together our Black Action Plan, because we said, where's the Black people at the top?
Yeah.
So, you look around, you see the figures, and then you put a plan into place as to what are we going to do to move the dial here? What are we going to do to make sure we have more women, more LGBTQ+, etc. So you need to have a plan of action. You need to look at the figures. You need to say, well, this is where we're short. What are we going to do to, improve? And then there really needs to be a real focus. And again, that has to come from the top. And everybody has to have a vested interest in doing that. So within the area that I work within, all of our partners are going to have, clear inclusion objectives that they're going to have to adhere to, so that they are, held accountable. Because there's no point us saying we're going to do X, and then, a year down the line, where are we? So it really needs to be a plan of action, and to be part of our day-to-day BAU tracking. Where are we? What needs to be done to make sure that the top of our organisation is diverse? So that's what we're working on at the moment.
Fantastic. We've got a question from Lee Pope. Do any of the panel have experience on assessing neurodiversity? Is there much kind of experience from that? And if so, please open up.
I can say that I have. Sorry, I mean, I know we have a project going on, but I'm not fully involved just yet, so I can't be of help.
Not a problem.
I think I'm not sure if we have an assessment for neurodiversity, but we've definitely held sessions within our organisation, making people aware, of some of those aspects of when you have a invisible disability and what that might mean to individuals, and how, we've also had some very senior leaders sort of open up about their own experiences, their personal experiences of neurodiversity, and how they've almost navigated their career around that. So I think, in terms of our journey, we're very much in the raising of awareness of neurodiversity and the challenges that colleagues may face. But in terms of assessing, you know, those needs and how they differ, I wouldn't say we have anything that's entirely different to our normal, you know, disability assessment process. And I think we really take individuals on their individual needs.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's similar for us. We do have many sessions. I think there's literally one a week over the summer on neurodiversity. So it's very big on our agenda at Deloitte. I can't 100%. I think we do have an assessment that people can take and check if they are neurodiverse, but it is definitely big on our agenda, and it's being put at the forefront. There's a lot of training as well going on around neurodiversity as well. But Leah, I'll double check and help you if I can. Have a look through.
Thank you. I mean, we'll certainly provide some answers afterwards as well. But a question from Kemi. I'd be curious to hear some of the key organizational commitments made by your organizations, whatever you can share, of course. Let's B, could you have a go at this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I can share is that at the moment, we are focusing on moving the entire employee life cycle forward. So when I say the entire life cycle, we have divided it into 6 pillars. So how we attract the most, diverse and best talent out there, how we do, how do we attract, how do we hire them or recruit them, how do we develop them, retain them, and so on. And actually, we do have particular commitments to move each pillar forward. But I would say that all in all, for the region of EMEA, we have a strong focus on increasing the percentage of employees with disabilities, both visible and invisible, as Yinka mentioned. And when thinking of UKI, so the UK and Ireland, we are very much focused on race and ethnicity. So of course, partnerships to make sure that we increase and attract the number of Black employees, not only at entry level, but also at VP plus level. So, and if I can recall correctly, one of our very, let's say, strong commitments is to reach the mark of a 50% VP plus Black representation by 2023, for example. So basically, even though we were talking earlier about how the challenge that it is to prioritize, because there's so much work to be done right now, that's how we're doing it. So we have breaking down the employee life cycle into pillars, and then we have set up around 5 or 6 initiatives under it with 2 or 3 big goals, like what I just shared, to make sure that we move everything forward.
Right. Thank you. And how about at Natwest Group, Yinka? What commitments?
So we have quite a few commitments. So for our protected characteristics, we have employee-led networks to support those colleagues, but we also have targets for our female and gender split. So we just finished one target which we were able to achieve, but our next target is 2030 to have a 50-50 split. We also have targets for our Black, Asian and minority ethnic colleagues, and both of those targets are really focused on increasing diversity at the top leadership layers of the organisation. And last year we were to add to the Black, Asian and minority ethnic target of 14%. We also were able to include a specific Black target, again, to help increase diversity at those senior layers of leadership. From LGBTQ+ and a disability perspective, again, we're really on the awareness journey. And just raising awareness, having specific sessions, just to increase awareness of the challenges that people that identify from those groups would particularly face, and how to help leaders really support those colleagues. So I think for us, it's about positive action, and it's about, you know, the attraction, development and retain, and really helping colleagues along their life cycle to reach their full potential. So I think, you know, in all of the diversity strands, there's always more that can be done, and I think there's a specific commitment from our CEO to not stop until every single colleague feels like they belong and are part of the organisation. So that's a really strong commitment from the top.
Right, that's fantastic. Really good to hear. Really, really good to hear. Anything else, Nadine? That I know you mentioned quite a lot about the fantastic work at Deloitte.
Yeah, I didn't want to go back through it again, so I've just posted our back action plan in the link there. But just going on from what Yinka said, you know, it's so important, you know, I know across many organisations that we continue this work, and to make sure that our, you know, workplaces are really diverse, and it's ongoing, and it is literally BAU, and we need to be checking it and making sure people do feel included, because when they feel included, they stay. When they know that I too can progress to the next level, they stay. But where they feel like, you know, I'm not included, I'm not going to be able to progress to the next level in my career, I have to leave to progress, this is the problem. So this is why inclusion is so important for, you know, the employee life cycle, and for our good talent to stay, you know. So for me, that's where the focus is. Yes, we need to have a diverse, you know, employee population. Yes, we do. But we do really need to make sure people do feel included, do feel like that they can progress, because that's when the real change will really come about. When you see people staying and progressing up the level, then you'll see other people also staying and knowing, you know what, I can do that too because X is there. Do you know what I mean? So it really is so important to make sure that we are making sure that we do have that diverse leadership at the top, and do make sure that people feel included and that they can thrive within, you know, the workplace that they're at as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's extremely important. So, I mean, if any more questions from our group, you know, please feel free to take yourselves off mute and ask. And actually, what do you feel is the biggest challenge in building an inclusive culture? That's come from Olivia. B, if you could answer that question.
Let me see. So I do see a few challenges, but I would say that the main challenge, and basically a little bit of what we've been talking about, making sure that the top is aligned. I would say that's one of the main challenges when we're trying to build an inclusive culture. You might have, like, you know, wonderful experts like we have here, Yinka, Nadine, and they might, you know, pour their heart and soul in trying to create an inclusive culture, but without the support from the top, without them, you know, being there as role models, without, you know, them like leading by example, it really does pose an immense challenge. So I would say that that focusing, or, you know, like putting some resources into that educational piece that we mentioned earlier, let's say like tailored for our senior executives, making sure they are on board, making sure that they feel also, you know, safe and welcome to ask whatever questions they might have, because sometimes, you know, senior people don't ask those questions because of that reason. They're senior, so they feel that maybe it's not okay for them not to know everything. So it is, you know, we can help them create those safe space where we can educate them, and then make sure that they're on board, they're supporting us in, and they're really an active part of creating that inclusive culture. So that would be, I think, the main challenge that I would share.
Thank you, B. Anything else to add? Yinka, what are your thoughts?
So I think, Alex, it's the top layer. I think we've seen lots of organisations, you know, make those commitments at the top of the house. But I think a lot of these changes are actually implemented at that middle layer. And it's about making sure that they're engaged on the journey as well. You know, they feel comfortable, you know, having those discussions, whether it be about race or any other protected characteristic. And they're really clear on the actions that they need to take to make a difference. I mean, you know, there could be lots of competing priorities, but I think, as Nadine and Bea have mentioned, you know, this needs to be embedded. It needs to be woven into part of the makeup of what we do and how we do it. And I think it's really about helping all levels of management, you know, really be equipped to make that difference. And I think the other piece for me is really around the data. So, you know, we can track where we are, we can have that transparency, and people can really target and focus on the areas that need more help than others.
Great, thank you. To all speakers, if you could only measure one inclusion metric, what would it be? Let's start off with you, Nadine.
One inclusion metric. Oh. Now I'm thinking, that's a good question. I don't know if it would be around belonging. Yeah, I think it would be around, you know, do I feel like I belong? But then the key metric for me, again, going back to the whole inclusion piece and, you know, keeping people, retaining people is, you know, looking at our attrition. Are people coming in and then leaving? You know, and looking at progression, is everyone progressing? Then I would feel like, you know what, everyone feels included. Everyone knows that they can progress and really have a career here. So I don't think it's just one. It's hard.
That was a difficult question.
Elements, right?
Yeah,
so
definitely difficult question.
So sorry, I can't give one.
No. It is a bit of a trick question. Obviously, you shouldn't just give one because that's not very good data management. But I'm just really interested to hear what, if you could only do one, what it would be. And it's just really interesting to hear you say both belonging and retention and attrition data.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Beatrice, would you dare to answer this question? I mean, what are your thoughts? Could you pin it down to one?
Well, actually, if I had to choose just the one at this very moment, I would focus on employee perception. I would actually, I would really like to understand what's the gap between what the company is saying, what the company's statement is or their beliefs is, and what the, let's say, the reality in the ground among the employees is. So yeah, I think that would be my my inclusion metric of choice, perception.
And can I just ask a follow-up to that? How exactly would you go about identifying that gap? What question would you ask to identify that gap?
Actually, what I am doing at the moment, that even though it's not scalable, so, you know, I have to fix that other challenge, but what I'm doing right now that is actually working is selecting, like, let's say, like a random sample of employees, and so different levels, different everything, and actually having one-to-one conversations with them where I basically learn more about, for example, what was their perception of the company on day one when they joined, around everything about what their job was going to be, what their career progression was going to be, and then today, has that changed and why? Like, if your perception has changed, has anything happened? For example, how's the relationship with your manager? Has, you know, that relationship have an impact on your perception? So it's basically a conversation. And obviously, when I say that's not scalable, you know, you can't talk to every employee. So right now, you know, yeah, so right,
you're sort of doing expectations when you come into the role versus reality, for example, when you're in it. Okay.
Yeah, for example, yeah, because in the end, that is the perception, and that also shows us how are we communicating. For example, when we are attracting candidates, are we really writing our job descriptions, in a way that actually reflects what the candidate is going to, find, or is there any disconnect? So yeah, so basically those conversations really help a lot to understand what the gap is. And now the challenge that I'm facing is how to make that scalable and how to make sure that we can actually apply something similar or something that would yield similar results to all employees. So whenever I find a solution, I promise I will share.
Yeah, sounds really, really insightful as a piece of analysis.
Definitely.
Thank you.
And Yinka?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm always about the quantitative and the qualitative, and what story does that tell. But if I had to pick one question, I think it would be around, what do employees feel would be the one or two things that they would like to see that would really have an impact to make a change. Because I'm very big on, thought leadership and bringing people along on the journey. And I think if everybody's sort of invested in that plan, because they've input into that plan, it is really going to have the impact that is required. So I think for me, it would be really trying to understand, yes, we know there's lots of problems, but what would be the one thing that would really make a difference to you in your work life? So I think that would be the data point.
Thank you very much. Now we've had a question from Kemi, and I know, Nadine, that you've just posted something into the group. Would you be able to kind of expand a little bit more on kind of how you measure the ethnicity pay gaps and what the journey's been like to getting that data?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that sits with me specifically, but it's something that we've done over the past maybe 4 years, and we've also always done our gender pay gap as well. And I guess it's been a journey. I think at the moment we are at 87% disclosure in terms of people disclosing, so quite high compared to some other organisations that I know of. But it's just saying to individuals, this is the reason why you should disclose, and just it's again around transparency. I think you mentioned transparency before, but it's about being transparent about what is going on, where are we, where are the gaps, and where do we need to make some radical changes in our approaches. So I've shared the link there, so that has all the detail, and again we have the action plans. Not just the Black Action Plan, we have a gender balance action plan as well. So we're looking at all aspects of the protected characteristics, making sure that everybody is included. But it's again just making sure everyone is aware why we're doing it. It's not just a good thing to do. There's a business case behind it. We all know the difference. The amount of money difference, if we have a diverse workforce. So it's again just reiterating that to our colleagues as to why they should share their data, and again around transparency as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. We don't have any more questions, but we would certainly love to carry on this conversation past this event and beyond. So if you do want to talk about this in more depth, please feel free to reach out to myself and also each of our speakers. I'm sure they'll be happy to post their contact email addresses to connect with everyone. At the start of the session, we did post a survey. We haven't had as many responses as we'd like, but please do still feel free to input your thoughts. It is really important for us to really understand where we want to go in terms of our inclusion journey, and if we can be of any assistance, we certainly would love to be. Or certainly reach out to each and every one of you after this event and disclose some of the results as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and a special, big thank you to our three fantastic speakers today. I don't know about you, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I've learned a lot. I've been jotting a few things down, so it's always great to speak. It's a great opportunity to learn, and also just takes us that step closer to inclusion within our own organisations. So thank you very much. Please have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for giving us your lunchtime today. We will have another event in October. We will be delving deeper into the topic, and hopefully we'll see you then. So thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.